One thing that I thought that might be helpful is if I try to communicate my invisible disability. I want to start by saying that my closest family and friends are brilliant. They continue to research my invisible disability and my brain disorder. And I'm really lucky to have friends who are social workers. They are advocates in disability, and I also have a friend who is a neuroscientist, and she teaches this topic at the university. So I'm really lucky to have a strong support group who can help me as I navigate my new world. And yet I have had a lot of experiences from people who don't understand my disordered brain, and this is often in the medical community. So I had blood clots in my brain that put pressure on an arterial venous malformation, and that caused a hemorrhagic stroke. So one of the hallmarks of stroke is a decline in physical function. So when we think of stroke, we often think of impaired speech or impaired physical movement. And for me, I look pretty typical. But if you've seen some of my other videos, you will know that I am relearning how to read and write and count, but those aren't all of my limitations. I also have problems ordering, I have brain fog and brain fatigue, and I also really struggle in word finding issues. So I really enjoy walking in nature because I am very focused in urban environments, and my brain gets pulled in all these directions and is hyper-focused on all of the wrong things, such as license plate numbers and street names and house numbers. And so I don't think the same, I don't feel the same, and I don't move through my environment the same. So I don't fit the mold of what a person with a disability is supposed to look like. And it's very unhelpful when well-meaning people say, "You're back to your old self," or "When are you going back to work?" or "You just look so good." It makes you feel as though you aren't heard and understood. I've even had to explain my disability to people in the medical community who are responsible for my rehabilitation. And these are people who should know better. When I was in the hospital, I couldn't read the alphabet. I couldn't spell my name. I couldn't count. I couldn't read clocks. I couldn't remember my kids' middle names. And yet, when I received my discharge papers, it was a printed document. And this is what I received from my physical therapist. This discharge plan could easily have been provided using pictures or videos. And when I said, "I can't read it," she just started to highlight different words as though that would help. And this was week 5 of hospitalization. And so I wonder what role my invisible disability was playing a role even with these healthcare workers. When we typically hear of someone who can't read, we often think of a concussion patient. And so they can't read due to headaches or light sensitivity. Perhaps it's nausea or concentration. But unlike friends, my healthcare worker, she actually had an expert she could speak to about my disability, my speech language pathologist. My speech language pathologists in both my inpatient and my outpatient care have been fantastic. They have been wicked smart and creative, and they are clearly the experts in my care. And so I'm reminded that even health professionals such as my physical therapist in a stroke ward at an hospital with an expert in care, to just ask, that they can still make mistakes. In order to be discharged from the hospital, you have to demonstrate that you can feed yourself, and there is a kitchen that is set up on the ward for this purpose. And so I decided that I would make a Greek salad because I wouldn't have to read a recipe and I wouldn't have to measure anything. You know, no one can tell you that you didn't use the right amount of green peppers. But the very strange thing in this kitchen is that there are labels on all of the cabinets. So for cutlery or cups. And when I asked my occupational therapist, you know, where are the knives? She just kind of motioned as though I just needed to read it all. And I thought, gosh, this is so inaccessible. The city has a really large French population. There could be people who never learned how to read, or people with an acquired injury like my own. And I thought, how easy would it be just to put pictures up on all of these cabinets? And again, I couldn't help wonder whether or not my speech-language pathologist was consulted in that decision. In my outpatient care, I have received a document from a well-meaning nurse that has colorful overlays on text, so in red and yellow and green, to help me read. I have had medical community members who have left me voicemail messages with phone numbers on them to call them back, but I can't hear that number and then write down it accurately to be able to give them a call back in that way. You know, I really try to say things like I just can't read, or I have really low literacy skills, or I'm reading now at a grade 1 level, and it doesn't really seem to work. And so I just really wonder about people who have less advocacy experience than I do and how they talk about their invisible disability. One of the other things I want you to know is that this takes a big emotional toll. I've lost my job, I've lost all my volunteerism, and in a lot of ways I have lost my identity. And so beyond all of the dysfunction, there is a big emotional toll. And self-advocacy is hard, and it's exhausting to have to justify your disability and bring awareness to your invisible disability. So something else to consider is the impact of COVID-19 moving forward. We know that 1/3 of patients will experience neurological or psychiatric illness about 6 months after illness. And so there is a wave of invisible disability on the horizon. So when I think about what is important from this video, it is for healthcare workers to remember that they're on a team for a very good reason. It's to draw on the expertise of everybody on the team so that they can provide the best care for the patient. And the second thing is that self-advocacy is really important, and if you can't do that for yourself, you've got to find someone who can advocate for you. And this is the end of my video on invisible disability, so thank you for coming along and listening to all of this today.